Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Peruvian Mummies. A team of archaeologists investigating the Atacama Desert of Peru have found over 150 mummies from an unknown culture that predates the Inca by roughly 500 years. These mummies were preserved naturally because they were buried directly in the sand and wrapped in cotton veils and fishing nets. The arid and dry climate helped with the rest. Weirdly, the burial plots were not marked by any kind of structures. There were no gravestones, grave monuments, or anything of that nature. Radiocarbon dating has revealed that the oldest mummy comes from the 4th century AD, while the most recent was buried in the 7th century. The team began investigating places of interest in the Atacama Desert back in 2008, but didn't make any major discoveries until 2014. Since there were no structures to mark burials, finding the mummies was incredibly difficult. But once they found one, they began to find another, then another. And even though they weren't buried in impressive mausoleums, they were left with some significant grave goods, including beautifully decorated pottery and precious beads and jewelry crafted from a gold and copper alloy. The researchers who found the mummies say that they have no idea what group of people they belong to, perhaps an ancient race of desert dwellers who have never been mentioned in historical records. The people found buried in the desert were probably nobility or elite members of society, though there is no clue yet as to where the ordinary members of the mysterious society were buried. Number 9. Magician's Cursed Tablet. An ancient magician's cursed tablet has just been found in Jerusalem. Not only is this thing creepy, it's also very mysterious. The cursed tablet dates back 1,700 years and was found inside a collapsed Roman mansion in the city of Jerusalem. The mansion was being excavated by the Israel Antiquities Authority after its remains were discovered underneath a parking lot. This parking lot is located in a part of the city known as the City of David, with a known occupation going back 6,000 years. The Roman mansion was used much more recently, around 363 AD, before it was destroyed by a series of earthquakes. The text on the cursed tablet is written in Greek, and here's where things get really creepy. A woman named Kyrilla wrote down the names of 6 gods, beseeching them to smite a man named Lennis over a legal dispute. She wrote on the tablet for the gods to nail down his tongue and eyes, and for him to in no way oppose her and instead be subject to her. Expert Robert Walter Daniel says this woman combined 4 different religions to try and successfully carry out the curse. She used 4 Greek gods, 1 Babylonian god, and 1 god from a Gnostic religion loosely connected to early Christianity. Then in the curse itself, she used magic words from Hebrew. A little overkill, don't you think? Unfortunately, we don't actually know if the curse was successful or not, but whoever this woman was, she definitely went through a whole lot of trouble to try and pull it off. Number 8. Cannibal Tribe. Anthropologists in Mexico have announced a very grisly discovery after investigating the skeletal remains of early Jijime Indians who inhabited a series of cave dwellings around the year 1450. According to their research, these people consumed human flesh during creepy rituals associated with the crop cycle. The study went on for 4 years. Researchers looked at 40 human bones found in the Sierra de Durango mountains of northern Mexico. 80% of the human remains they looked at showed signs of being cut and boiled, meaning the people who lived here sliced up dead people, leaving cut marks on their bones, and then boiled their body parts to be cooked and eaten. Even more bizarre is that evidence shows that the Jijime Indians only killed and ate people of their own ethnicity. As for the enemies that they killed, they kept their bodies to be used as part of other rituals for renewing the crop cycle. But why did they eat their own? Researchers say that everyone in the society would take part in eating the dead people's bodies. It was part of a ritual to absorb the souls of the dead and become more powerful. The most prized body parts were the heads and hands. By doing this, they believed that not only could they absorb the power of the dead, but they could also bring a more bountiful harvest for the next year's crops. Number 7. Ancient Buried Twins. On the shores of the Danube River in Hungary, researchers have discovered the remains of a young woman buried in an ancient cemetery. She was buried about 4,000 years ago along with twin fetuses. It doesn't get much creepier or sadder than that. But researchers wanted to understand more about this woman and her life, and it's not every day that we find a dead person with ancient unborn twins. As far as researchers have been able to gather, this woman was part of the Vatya culture. These people cremated their dead, which has made it rather difficult for archaeologists to study much about them. Most of their dead people weren't buried, but instead turned to ash. While investigating this ancient cemetery, researchers were able to gather human tissue from 29 graves, though only 3 of them were physical burials. The other 26 were cremations. And here's where the story of the woman and her twins gets a little spookier. She was cremated with the unborn still inside. Researchers discovered all 3 of their remains inside of an urn. The woman was about 25 years old when she died, with the fetuses being 32 weeks. The woman was also found with some impressive grave goods, such as a golden ring that she probably wore in her hair. She was likely a high-ranking member of society, though researchers have yet to determine what caused her death. Number 6. Jigsaw Mummies. In 2001, 4 bodies were discovered in Scotland's Outer Hebrides, but they weren't recent by any means. The find was actually quite exciting because these bodies turned out to be the first evidence of mummification ever found in Britain. But the story is creepier than that. Researchers now say that these mysterious mummies were actually put together using various body parts from several different people, like some jigsaw Frankenstein monsters. Professor Mike Parker Pearson from Sheffield University says that the mummies were not buried immediately after they died, but may have been used as bizarre props in the society. The first mummy found seemed to be a female burial at first, based on the pelvis of the skeleton. However, the skull turned out to be from a man. The other 3 mummies turned out to be just as weird, with all of them stitched together using random body parts. The professor says that the mummies likely played an active part in whichever tribal society lived in this very remote place. The mummies may have even been worshipped, likely pieced together from ancestral body parts. The people probably asked the mummies for spiritual advice and consulted them on making the big community decisions. However, it's not clear what kind of answers these ancestors may have given, or if this was a very common custom. And now for number 5, but first want to say a big thank you to Lori Carter in Tennessee and Taita Yates. Thanks so much for being here and for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 5. The Ritual Sweat Bath. Archaeologists working in Guatemala have uncovered a bizarre trove of Maya artifacts and human remains, giving them new information on the spiritual significance of the ancient sweat bath ritual. The sweat bath ritual goes back to most of the earliest cultures of Mesoamerica. The Maya and the Aztec both used sweat baths for spiritual and health reasons. Most women even gave birth in sweat baths. It was basically like a sauna in which a state of extreme sweating was accomplished through fire, chanting, and prayers. At the site of Hultun, archaeologists working with the Smithsonian Tropical Institute found bones and tools inside a sweat bath. Research has shown that indigenous Maya may have believed that their sweat baths were inhabited by spirits. This particular bath dates back to around 500 AD. On the exterior of the structure was the depiction of the Maya goddess Ixtuzak in the likeness of a toad. She was a deity associated with birth and creation. Archaeologists say that the bath was used probably for about 300 years, and that throughout its use, the bones of dead people were built into the structure's doorway to add to the potency of whatever bizarre rituals went down inside of the physical bathhouse. Number 4. Frightening Polish tombs. Archaeologists in Poland have made a frightening discovery. They recently found a mass burial site with roughly 120 tombs. To make things even scarier, the skeletal remains of children and mostly young people were found inside the graves. Found near a Polish village, almost all of the young people buried here still have coins pressed into their mouths. Archaeologists believe the tombs were built sometime during the 17th century, so about 400 years ago. 80% of the remains are children, suggesting that the child mortality rate during these years was significant. Archaeologists also say that the people buried here were extremely poor, as they were buried with no personal possessions, just the coins. The coins were minted during the reign of King Sigismund III. But why were the coins placed inside the children's mouths? This was part of an ancient belief that in order to get to the afterlife, a person needed to pay the ferryman Charon to get them across the river of the dead. Without the payment, the soul of the deceased would have no way of making it to the blissful happiness of the afterlife. Number 3. Heads on stakes. In Sweden, researchers have uncovered evidence of something never before seen in our ancient hunter-gatherer ancestors. 8,000 years ago, somebody cut off some heads and then impaled them on stakes. According to the professionals, this bizarre discovery is changing the way archaeologists understand how the earliest Europeans took care of their dead people. Up until this discovery, most historians believed impaling decapitated heads on wooden stakes was only in the Middle Ages. Now we know it goes all the way back to the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. But even though evidence of the behavior has been found, archaeologists still can't explain why it happened. The researchers working on this project are with Stockholm University. They discovered the skulls at the bottom of what was once an ancient lake. The lake has since dried up and allowed archaeologists to dig up the remains of the old burial site. They have so far found tools built from antlers, pieces of human skull, and scraps of animal bones. An unknown group of ancient Scandinavians lived here and survived by hunting and fishing. However, we still know almost nothing of their beliefs or behavior. What we do know is that out of 10 individuals found buried here, all of them showed signs of blunt force trauma to the skull before death. But these traumas were not lethal, instead only designed to cause pain and bleeding. Researchers don't know what the point was of doing this. 3 of the skulls showed additional trauma after death, and researchers found scraps of wooden stakes dislodged inside the skulls. Number 2. Ancient cemetery and fortress. A mysterious cemetery and fortress have been discovered in Poland dating back 5,000 years. It seems Poland is just full of creepy discoveries. This one consists of tombs lined with stones, and amazingly, the cemetery was only discovered because scientists were checking out satellite photographs and realized that something didn't quite look right about a field of crops. When they began excavating the rural site, they discovered a total of 7 Neolithic tombs and a medieval fortress. Oh yes, and they found 2 horses buried during the Bronze Age. Some of these tombs are up to 160 feet long, pretty enormous. According to Live Science, the cemetery was probably made by the funnel beaker people, an ancient race who got their name because of the distinct pottery that they made. It's believed that the funnel beaker people were the first farmers to ever live in Europe. So far, this has been labeled as one of the largest megalithic cemeteries anywhere in Central Europe. The fortress was actually built much later, probably during the 10th century, even before the Kingdom of Poland was even a thing. There's been no evidence found yet that the fortress was ever even inhabited, and archaeologists believe it was probably just a short-lived military encampment. It also probably had nothing to do with the graves. In fact, the graves had already been covered for thousands of years before the fortress was made. These people probably didn't even know that their ancient ancestors were buried underneath their very feet. Number 1. Inca sacrifice victims. A shocking new discovery has revealed that mind-altering drugs played a part in the sacrificial deaths of young children discovered at the peak of Volcan Yuyayaco in Argentina. These children were discovered by researchers left inside of an ice cave at the top of the mountain, so well preserved that they make Egyptian mummies look like the work of amateurs. The children were around 13 years old when the Inca took them up the mountain, had them drink alcohol, gave them coca, and let them freeze to death drunk and stoned as part of an unknown sacrificial ritual. Archaeologists were able to piece this story together by doing a biochemical analysis of one of the young children's hair, a young girl nicknamed the Maiden. They could see everything she ate and drank within the last 2 hours she was alive. At the very end of her life, they saw that she was drinking a lot of alcohol and chewing a lot of coca. This makes sense because in the Inca culture, altered states of perception were sacred, with drugs almost exclusively being used in rituals. However, it's not clear whether the kids were drugged to make them easier to sacrifice, to help them get closer to the Inca gods, or what. Plus, archaeologists don't even know what the sacrifice was about. They only know that it must have been extremely important for the Inca to drag the kids 22,000 feet up the mountain to the summit to perform the ceremony. Thanks for watching! Which discovery did you think was the creepiest? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!